All right, Bush Chairman.
All right, I guess that's me. Hi, welcome everybody. Good to see everybody here today. My name's Amy Smith. I'm the chair of the Urban Forestry Commission. So let's start off with introductions today. So let's see, I guess I'll just call on people. So Patrick.
Patrick Gilbert, Vice Chair of the Urban Forestry Commission.
All right, Sharon. You're on mute, Sharon.
Sorry, Sharon Summerall, Urban Forestry Commission, TRC representative.
All right, Steve, are you here?
I am. I'm in Colorado, though.
Ooh.
You might see it on the screen. Steve Hendricks, Urban Forestry Commission.
Thank you. All right, how about Ed?
Hey, Ed Macy, Urban Forestry Commission. I'm not in Colorado.
All right, Perrin.
Perrin DeYoung, Urban Forestry Commission, and Colorado's looking good today.
Yeah.
All right.
It is.
Let's see, we have some city staff. So Haley.
Haley Mahoney, Planning Technician with Development Services Department and Staff Assistant to the Urban Forestry Commission.
Thanks. And Nancy?
Nancy Watford, Site Engineering Coordinator, Development Services, and Staff Liaison to Urban Forestry Commission.
Thank you. Ben, are you around?
I am Ben Woody, Director of Development Services, and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. And let's see, I see Vidila.
Hi, Vidila Savica, Planning and Urban Design. Just listening in mostly.
Thank you. And Mark.
Hey, Mark Foster, City Arborist, Public Works Department.
Thank you. Let's see, Mike. Mike Wheeler.
Mike Wheeler, Planner for the Development Services Department.
All right, thank you. And is there anybody else from the city? There's some names I don't recognize. So anyone else with the city with us today? All right, if not, if you're here for alternative compliance or public comment, if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself. I can call on names or looks like I see Jim or Florence.
Yeah, this is Jim Coyle, Civil Engineer, Greenberg Farrell, representing Murphy.
Thank you, nice to meet you. And Florence?
Hi, this is Florence Abrenica with Greenberg Farrell. We also have Alex Maddox, our landscape architect, and John Getz is on from Murphy, USA, and Dorothy Volker, also from Greenberg Farrell, here to present and answer any questions that you may have. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone who wasn't part of that or wants to introduce yourself separately? Go ahead. All right, I think that looked like everybody. Well, welcome once again, everyone, to our July meeting. We're going to start with approval of the minutes from June. Hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at those in the meeting packet. So we need to do a roll call vote to approve those minutes. I need a motion.
So move.
And a second.
I second.
Thank you. All right, so let's start with Patrick.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
Perrin.
Aye.
And that is it for today. So I also vote aye, so that motion passes. And so we'll move right on along to our alternative compliance. So it looks like, Mike, will you be kicking us off?
Yeah, I'll be filling in for Jennifer Blevins. She's out of the office this week, so I'll be presenting the case that you have before you, which is Murphy Express, located at 120 Airport Road. The PIN number is 9653180833. The property is currently zoned commercial industrial, and it's about a 1.47 acre tract of land. The project proposed is for a new gas station and convenience store. It's approximately 7,600 square feet of building and canopy area. And the site is required to be brought into full compliance with all the landscaping requirements found in Article 11 of the UDO. The applicant has a minor issue with some street tree requirements. They have approximately 217 feet of linear frontage along Airport Road. The code requires a total of 5 large maturing trees to be installed, and they do have the ability to install those trees. However, there are some spacing concerns that they have, and that's the reason they're here today before you to request alternative as it relates to spacing between 2 trees. The code requires you can't space farther than 65 feet apart. They do have one gap in 2 trees that are 78 feet apart. And also they want to request a spacing deviation from the distance from the road to a street tree. There's one tree they can't position within 20 feet of the road. It'll be about 30 feet from the edge of the road. In reviewing the plan, I believe Jennifer did indicate that there are some utilities along the front of the road that are presenting some problems for them meeting the strict letter of the ordinance. And I don't know if we have the site plan up that we can show. Yeah, so if you'll see at the bottom of your screen, those 5 trees are the trees that we're discussing today. And my understanding is the rest of the landscaping for the development will be meeting the minimum requirements of the code. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, thank you, Mike. Real quick, I saw that Cecil jumped on. So Cecil, you want to take a second, introduce yourself?
Sure enough, member of the Urban Forestry Commission. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. Protecting trees out back just now.
All right. Well, thank you. Glad you can make it.
Yeah.
We just started with alternative compliance. So go ahead if anyone has any questions for our applicants.
Yeah, Mike, you described kind of generally what the issue is with tree spacing. I think what I understand you to be saying is that the required number of trees are in this plan, but that the spacing between the trees along the bottom of the image, which I think you referred to as the front of the property, is different because there's a water line easement there. Is that right?
Yeah, there's some water line easements and possibly some sewer line easements as well running along the front of the property. And that is correct. We're basically dealing with just spacing itself. The number of trees are being provided. It's just that based on the utilities, they weren't able to get all the required trees within 20 feet of the street. And they also had that separation between the property line and the tree. If you'll notice, the street tree on your right is more than 65 feet from the property line itself. And so the code says it can't be a gap there more than 65 feet. So I think there's some utilities in that corner there that are preventing the placement of that tree as well.
And I can't see on this image what that street is. Would you just remind us again which street that is?
So it's a private road that kind of leads you into, I believe it leads into the Walmart, and also there's a Carolina Concepts furniture store that's behind this property. And so it's mainly just an access road for some of those commercial developments. It's private.
Okay, so the main issue is that some of these trees are farther away from the road than typically would be required, right?
Yeah, one tree is farther than the road from the road than the code would require. The code says they got to be within 20 feet of the street. The street tree to the far left is 35 feet from the street, so that tree right there doesn't meet the spacing requirements that the code identifies.
Okay.
The other spacing requirement is just the separation distance between a street tree and a property line or another tree.
Okay. Thank you. That answers all my questions.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Or if somebody's ready, we can make a motion on this issue.
First, we would need to open it for public comment. but we don't have anybody on, so you're good to go.
Okay, appreciate that. All right. But go ahead if there's more discussion or a motion.
I move that we approve this request.
I second it.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and vote. Start with Patrick.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Cecil.
Aye.
Perrin.
Aye.
And I vote aye. So that motion passes. Thank you, everyone who was here for that alternative compliance request.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. All right. So we've had one alternative compliance today, so we can move on. Next on the agenda is public comment. Is there still nobody around? Or doesn't look like anybody called in. Okay. All right. Well then, staff reports. Mark, did you have a report for us?
No, sorry. Last week was just the sort of week that's typical this time of year. Everything's going crazy. But there's nothing really unusual to report, just standard issue risk tree management and roadside vegetation management. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, thanks. I don't know. We had a slightly different setup on the agenda, so you'll have your own space toward the front there if you have anything to update us on.
Oh, right on. Thank you.
And then DSD, a report on the tree protection ordinance. Looks like we have some stats ready, a little bit of data that came in. So I don't know, Nancy, if you want to go over that.
Yes, so this is our first report from the tree protection ordinance data tracking. So this is permits that are issued, and the date was actually last Thursday when I pulled these, but we've preserved 43,800 plus square feet. And then there's been 6,160 square feet of planted canopy. And then there's been a fee in lieu for 2 projects at 35,563.13 as a total. And both of those are in the Urban Resource Management District. And that's it so far.
Great, thanks. We'll talk more about the rollout of the ordinance in a moment, but any questions for Nancy while we're on this point here?
What was the square footage of the planted trees, Nancy, again?
6,160 square feet.
Okay. So a lot more preserved than planted. That's good news. Yeah.
Is it possible to identify which projects they were? You said 2 projects, right?
No, so there's, I think there was, oh no, I wrote it down, and it's at my desk. I think there was over a dozen that, or I think it was 17 that had to do, that triggered tree protection out of 166 that potentially could have. And 2 chose to do the fee in lieu, or a portion was fee in lieu. So I think one of them was a portion was fee in lieu and one was all fee in lieu. I'm not sure. I have to go back and pull the numbers to get that specific information.
So 6,000 square feet of newly planted trees maybe represents 4 trees, 4 or 5.
I think it's more than that, but yeah, close.
It's a very small handful. And
yeah.
So if what was the number for this preserve? 400,000 square feet. If they were properly protected, those trees will survive. And we're looking at a pretty good amount of canopy saved, but if they die from construction damages, then those will be replaced as well.
Mm-hmm.
And monitoring that is still an issue. We don't have a way to monitor the survival of trees. That's still pretty early on. I mean, some of these projects are probably still being built.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
As
these are just ones that have been issued their permits. So some of them haven't, like they're just mobilizing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
As we develop monitoring, it would be good to map those, of course, so we can see what's going on.
Yeah, and it'd be nice. So as this data starts coming through, if we can, have it in, like a table in the back end, even if that's not what we bring to the meeting, so that we can track it over time as well. So Nancy, we can get together on that of what's available for that.
And then I need specifics on
Yeah.
what y'all want to see.
Yeah. So maybe we can get together and see what's available and how we want to track that out. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
All right. Go ahead, Patrick.
So when you say there's 6,000 and some square feet of trees that have been planted, you mean they're earmarked to be planted? They haven't actually been planted yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
These plans have been approved and the permits have been issued. So as part of their development plan, they are proposed to have that many planted and credited towards.
Credited towards canopy. It doesn't include building impact trees or street trees or parking lot trees.
Not if planted, correct.
Right. Okay.
So I would assume at some point when there comes a time when those trees are actually going to be planted, the Urban Forestry Commission would be involved in where those trees will be planted?
No, they're on proposed plans as approved.
Beg
They're
your pardon?
on plans that are approved. So it's up to the designers, the design professionals to identify where they're being planted. And they go through review on the design plan.
So these trees will be trees that will be planted on the site?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they wouldn't have to come before us unless there was some sort of alternative or issue or something like that.
Correct.
Good question. Anything else? We're gonna, again, we'll revisit some finer points of the ordinance coming right up here. So, all right, thanks, Nancy.
Right.
All right, so next we're gonna talk about old business. The first item is the budget request update. So for the upcoming fiscal year, City Council has already made their decisions on the budget. So what we'll be talking about now is how do we move forward with our budget requests? What do we want it to look like for the next request cycle? What would be 22, 23? And so we want to start now to get those priorities in line so that we can spend as much time as possible convincing City Council that this is a priority for everyone in the city. So let's see. An idea I had, and I just wanted to bring this up. This is just me. So this is totally open to discussion. But we've been requesting for the past few years an urban forester to be on staff, which is great. I totally agree that there should be an urban forester. But I'm wondering if we slightly change the name of this request to be an urban forestry program coordinator or something along those lines. And what I'm trying to get at is this idea that what the city needs is an urban forestry program, a whole line, a division, whatever you want to call it, within the city that focuses on sustainability of the urban forest and coordinates everything that goes along with that. The ordinances, the enforcement, all these pieces that we're talking about. And so I just wanted to throw that out there, that would it help us or would it just be more confusing to slightly change how we look at what that position might do and what we might call it. So just want to put that out there for discussion if anybody has any thoughts. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a great idea. I think that we should really target a senior staff professional, probably somebody with an advanced degree and years of experience, or at least 5 years experience. A real urban forestry professional that can deal with some pretty complicated issues that we're going to be facing in the future. I mean, we're talking about developing a master plan, with criteria indicators and adaptive management, and a plan that would help us adapt and mitigate climate issues. And what you're proposing is, I think, something that might dumb the position down and really not allow us to accomplish what we're looking for.
Point taken. I was looking at it as more higher level, but if it's sounding lesser, then that's not the way to go. So I would agree with that.
What you're proposing is part of the position, I think.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But I get what you're saying, that the focus on the, I don't just say arboriculture, but like that more intensive forestry side of it.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Ecosystem-based approach to managing a very vulnerable and complicated and necessary resource. I think that we should really think big picture with this and the master plan.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was
the stars on it.
Going for, was how to make it bigger picture, But I'm totally open to keeping the name of it the same. Go ahead, Perrin, if you had your hand up next.
I think that, the way I take your proposal, Amy, is that you're talking about adding an extra skill set to what a traditional arborist would have. And that would be sort of like the people management side of things, where volunteers can be wrangled and organized to do projects, and, coordination can happen between different committees and commissions of the city and that sort of thing. So maybe that's what I thought of when you brought up the idea, is sort of like, we need these hard skills of an urban forester plus somebody who can wrangle people and sort of keep a bigger coordinated, almost like a coalition effort going across the city. So I think to Ed's point, I see how changing the title might scare off some professional foresters who might see it as less prestigious to take a title that sounds a little more like an organizer and a little less like a forester. So it's worth thinking about, how to phrase it. But I think your point is well taken, that somebody with the skills to wrangle people and herd the cats, in addition to having the hard forestry skills, does seem like it will be necessary eventually.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was going for. Yeah, my whole idea here is, how do we get city council on board to see the importance, So would that be something that might be more palatable to them? But I agree. So I think Sharon was next.
I can see your point, Amy, but I'm in agreement with Ed, only for the fact is, if we're going to ask for something, let's ask for the big picture for the amount of money, because I'm afraid if we ask for something that's less technical, they give it to us with less money, then we're married to that. And then we've got to go re-ask again for something that is more highly technical, involves more skill set and more money. They're going to go like they're doing now. Well, we've got this, and that's working. And I would rather ask for the big picture and keep asking for the highly technical aspect of the skill. But I understand what you're saying. I didn't in the beginning, but now I do.
Yeah, and my intention was never that it wouldn't be highly skilled on the forestry side, because absolutely. And so then I guess the term does matter in that case. So Cecil was next. Oh, unmute Cecil. I know you're going to say something amazing. So.
Yes, the amazing thing I'm going to say is thank you. I guess one could look at what's been approved by council in the past, and I don't know if a coordinator is more likely to get council approval than a forester. From my experience on council, I can't think of which was more likely, but sometimes in bureaucracy speak, a coordinator might be more appealing than a forester. Well, we're not in the forest business. We're a city, Anyway, I think your suggestion is worth considering anyway. That's what comes to mind.
Thank you. Let's see. I think Patrick was next.
Yeah, so I sort of agree with all the comments so far. I think it would be, no matter what we call the position, I think it's important in terms of the skill sets that will be required for this position, to make it clear, not only to Perrin's point that this person will be, and to your point, Amy, that this person will be coordinating all the urban forestry programs, policies for the city of Asheville, but also that this person will be, in effect, directing city staff in areas that they do not have an expertise in. So I think it's vital. The message that we send to the city council is very important in terms of what this position will do. And so I think we do need to consider very carefully what we call this position.
Yes, thank you. I see, Ed, you have your hand up. Is that new? Don't forget to unmute, please.
I do. We have to get the position funded first. And, I think we've all done a very good job right now describing the job description, which is something that we have to put together and describe. And what we're describing is pretty typical of most city forester positions that we've talked about. I mean, in addition to implementing the master plan, they coordinate between departments and between the city and the community, implementation of the plan and other policies as they relate to urban forest management. So, what we call it right now is really not an important thing to focus on. I think we're all on the same page pretty much what the position should be. Let's just get that thing funded so we can get this job description, written out in detail. I've got copies of job descriptions of urban foresters from around the country, pretty easy to produce. That's all I have to say about that.
I agree. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I've, when we talked to city council before, we met with some of them individually. And one way to get the point across is we're talking about a city planner for trees, basically. I mean, we're talking at that level, but also coordinating a program. So all that's kind of inherent in the position. People have said that in different ways. I think that's the point. We have to get this integrated into the system so the whole planning system works properly.
Exactly. And that actually kind of brings us to the next piece of this. So I think, we can discuss this obviously more, but it sounds like obviously our request is going to continue to be a position and the urban forest master plan. And so I think our next step, and Patrick had the idea that we really should put together a working group to work on what will our steps be as far as getting this through. How are we going to communicate primarily to city council, but also getting that ground level support to really get this pushed through for the next budget cycle. So, I don't think it's too early to get a working group put together to start putting those key ideas in place so that we can start really hitting the ground with council for the next budget cycle. So thoughts on that, ideas, volunteers? Go ahead, Ed. Oh, can you unmute, please? Thank you.
Dang it. I think the Tree Protection Task Force and Greenworks could also really help support this type of activity. I don't know if you want it to be just a urban forestry commission group, or if you want to externalize it and get these other folks involved with this push.
Absolutely. I think we rely on all the leverage we can get. So maybe within this group, a smaller working group that's the spearhead to coordinate that larger effort. Absolutely. So yeah, I think that's what we did a couple years ago that I think got us really close, even though we didn't get there. But I think that same sort of intensive push is what we need. Oops. Any other? Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, I agree, Amy. I mean, I went to the budget meeting, and I don't know if anybody watched it, but I was the only one talking about the environment. And it was like a relief from everything else that was being hurled at council. So I don't know if any letters got out from anybody else that went to council for this, but we're going to have to really, really keep on them for a year and keep this in their purview and not let up like we did a couple years ago. So I agree, Tree Protection Task Force, a working group within UFC, and we just keep it up. I mean, it was wonderful a couple of years ago. Was that 2 years ago before COVID? That was an exceptional effort.
Yeah, I think Patrick was next.
Yeah, I would just like to suggest that that Ed Macy be the chair of this working group.
Go ahead, Ed, respond. You're still on mute. I wish I could unmute you from here. There you go.
I believe Patrick should be co-chair of that working group. But, you know, we've been sharing some really good literature that's been coming across the internet lately related to the importance of trees in mitigating climate and issues related to trees and equity. We've had American Forest did a urban forest equity scorecard for the city of Asheville and many other cities, you know, across the United States, and we're not looking very good. There's a lot of work that we have to do. So there's some real critical importance, I think, to the future of urban forestry for the city, and we have strong arguments. So, you know, I think we should use some of this new ammunition that's coming to us to really build a convincing case. And Patrick's a very good articulator. He's a good writer, and I really think that seriously, I'll help out as much as I can. But I would like Patrick to be, you know, co-chairing this team.
All right, we can talk about that, Patrick. Think about it. But Perrin, go ahead. Oh, hold on, real quick, Perrin. Sorry, really quick. I'm so sorry, but I saw that Kim jumped on. So Kim Roney, our council member liaison. Kim, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Good afternoon. I apologize for my tardiness. Thank you for your service. I'm glad to be here with y'all today.
Glad you're here. Thank you. Sorry, Perrin, go ahead.
Hi, Kim. Well, that's a good segue because actually the reason I raised my hand was just to bring Kim into this particular discussion we're having right now and get her caught up to speed. Hi, Kim. We're talking about the request that we've had before City Council to get an urban forester and fund the urban forestry master plan. And so we've just been talking about tactics and strategies and coalition building around that. And so now that you're here, I just wanted to open a space for you to give us any feedback on what you think would be effective in influencing a majority of council to be persuaded that this is a worthy priority in the upcoming budget year.
Sure. In this situation, I'm of course speaking for myself. When I'm watching the news about how our Mother Earth is showing the changes and the impact, especially with you know, the heat changes, what's going on not just in our own Pacific Northwest and this continent, but also across the globe, the urgency is more visible. And I think that there are some updates that could be made to the call as more and more human family are moving to Western North Carolina because of our temperate climate and general safety. I appreciate the advocacy that this group has done, and you have compiled tremendous amounts of data and numbers and made a compelling case. Getting more folks to sign on sounds like something that a advisory group could do. Doing more community engagement, which you're already doing a lot in your different roles in our community. So I would just encourage you to keep up the good work and keep it coming.
Thanks, Kim. That's great. Yeah, right before you jumped on, we were actually talking about that coalition building and trying to build upon what we had started a couple years ago when we had the tree symposium. I can't remember the title of that event, but something along those lines where we can keep those big pieces of momentum pushing through the whole community. So yeah, absolutely, that's great takeaway. So any other discussion? Let's see, Perrin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if anyone has a head count for us on how the vote broke down on our budget proposal in the last budget cycle. Do we know who voted in favor and who we still need to win over on council?
This is Kim. I would offer some clarifying information there. There wasn't a specific vote at the council level regarding your proposal. If you were looking for where a public-facing conversation would happen, I would say it's to look at the retreat, where the top 4 council priorities were identified, and that the work on repairing and maintaining our urban canopy was put in the category of already in process being worked on.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, Patrick, go ahead.
So the last time that we actually met face to face with city council members was before the most recent election. So unfortunately, the people that seem to be very responsive to our request for an urban forester, that dynamic has changed. And so, I think if I remember correctly, in the previous council, we had 3 pretty confirmed supporters behind our effort, and at least 1 more that appeared to be seriously considering our request. But unfortunately, those people have changed. So I think only 1 person who was firmly in our camp from the last council is still on the current council. So we do have a lot of work, almost going back to square one in terms of lining up support from the various council members.
Absolutely. Sharon, did you have something else?
No, it's a comment. When I went to council and spoke, I talked about what I saw as failing for us not having an urban forester. I saw Kim pay attention, but there was such a contentious budget meeting that I don't know if anything I said sank into any of the council members up there. But I think my comments at that time could go to the subcommittee about what's not working with staff. I mean, as I said, staff is doing an admirable job, but there's so much falling through the cracks where an urban forester would hold it together so much more than is being done so now. So I think that is a point that can be made over and over again in support of an urban forester.
All right, Kim just gave us a link there.
Well, I think
okay.
I think that one of the things that this group could request as an advisory board is a presentation of the findings from the Climate Justice Initiative and Plan. I've put a link to the city's website on the information that's currently available. This process with the listening sessions was last summer. And of course, we're doing it during a pandemic, but it would seem wise to see where we could link up with more information and engage the processes already in place.
Perfect, thank you. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly, we do have an opportunity coming up, the Building Our City series, which some of you are familiar with. I think gets some attention from City Council, and we have basically a spot promised to us. Soon as their current bookings are out, which goes through probably either we'll have a slot at the beginning of next year or at the end of this year, which would tie in okay with our budget requests and so forth. To get a dynamic speaker that would be paid for through that series to talk about urban forests and green infrastructure as part of building a city. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that's ongoing and we've been promised a spot. So we'll keep you updated on that.
That's great. Thank you. All right. Did anyone else want to get ready to form this working group? We can switch it out too. We can, if it starts with some people, someone else. If no one else is jumping on it right now, then I'll jump in for sure with Ed and Patrick to at least get us started. The three of us can get together and see what we can, throw the ideas around to start.
Yeah, I'm sure that Dawn will work with us as well. I can't speak for her, but I'm sure she'll say yes if you ask her.
Yeah, I will. I think we can rope her in. Okay, so Cecil had his hand up.
Yeah, I would be willing to jump in. I haven't jumped in on any working groups before, but I'd be thrilled to help with this one.
Wonderful. Well, then I might step out, but so I think 4 is our max. Oh, no offense.
Am I bumping you? Oh, I'm bumping you.
No, believe me, it would be great. We would love to have you step up and do that. That'd be great. So, Steve, go ahead.
I got my hand down. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, it's tough. Hands up, hands down. Okay. Well, then for now, we will, for now, I'll keep my name on it until Dawn officially, but it would be good to have that coordination with Greenworks. So for this minute, we'll say Patrick, Cecil, Ed, and myself. And then if Dawn is able and willing to take over, then we'll go with that. So Patrick, Ed, Cecil, Amy / Dawn. Okay. Wonderful. Well, then offline, the working group can just get started with brainstorming, sort of setting the vision and path for how we want to go forward with the request. Before I get ahead of myself, I don't know if we need to actually vote or anything, but I'm assuming we're just going to keep pushing with Urban Forest Master Plan as what we're looking for funding on. If there's any other discussion on that, let's go ahead and talk about that real quick. But nope. All right. And again, we don't have to finalize that till early next year, but we can start pushing for all of those ideas now. All right. Anything else? Good. Okay, so next we're going to talk briefly about the Urban Forest Master Plan, the work that we've had so far. I believe last month we already updated this group on the couple of, we just had one meeting so far. And Dawn was actually through Greenworks heading up the bit of these initial conversations. So I'm not actually sure where it's at this moment. I don't know, Ed, if you have any updates on where those trainings are at, or if there's anything, or we're just waiting for some more coordination through Greenworks.
I don't know what the calendar is for those, so we'll just have to wait till Dawn can join us next month, hear more about it.
Okay.
I do know that she's applied for some grants that may allow us to lay some groundwork related to some of the more social components, the social urban forest framework. So, and I don't know if she's gotten the funding yet, but it looked pretty positive. So we'll definitely have more to report next month.
All right, and just to go back so everybody's on the same page, Greenworks received a little bit of a grant, I believe, or as a city contract to just start doing some talking sessions. So this is very early stage, just laying sort of the groundwork with the city. And then this next piece would be to possibly have vignettes with the community to just start to get that input, community input for, like Ed was saying, the social and community framework side of the master plan. So that's where we're at so far. Updates will come. All right. So next is the tree canopy preservation ordinance. We got some stats from Nancy, so that was great. What we need to talk about now is what are the next steps. So we have a couple things that still need to be ironed out. We have the ordinance in place that provides this framework, but a couple things that we need to talk about are the fee in lieu portion. How does that money get spent? And what we don't have right now is any sort of decision matrix or framework for how that's going to go. Who makes the decisions? Who's involved? What's that whole process? And so the suggestion was possibly a working group to coordinate between the city and ourselves on what would we like to see? What would that look like? How should that process go? Because right now it's just a small amount now, but there will be more money in there and some big decisions will be made. And we know that anytime there's a pool of money, you ask 10 people, there will be 10 ideas on how it should be spent. So we need some sort of framework in place to make that decision process work for everybody. So any thoughts, first of all, on that fee in lieu part? Anyone really interested in doing some of that work to make a decision matrix, something that we can work with the city? I am, but I might be the only one. That's fine. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Perrin.
Well, I do think this is a really vital issue, and I think that if we, there are a variety of fee in lieu provisions baked into various ordinances that are being developed or already exist that relate to environmental protection. And there is a very real danger that if it's not defined, it's just going to be spent on buying pencils for somebody's office. So that, we do need to define it. And I think it's very important. To what extent has this been thought through by the people who worked on the tree canopy protection amendment? I think it'd be great to hear from them first.
Well, I'm not sure if Ben wants to jump in, but what my understanding is there's not a lot. It's just what's in the ordinance, which was just it has to be in a specific overlay district and that kind of thing. But so Ben, I don't know if you want to go next or Sharon. Ben, why don't you fill us in on where we're at with that?
Hey, I'll Sharon, I hope I don't steal it. I don't have a lot of information. Okay, good. So Perrin, that's a really good question. I won't say we didn't have any thought, but there wasn't a lot of detailed thought around, how those fees can be leveraged and used. I will say that there's a broad amount, I would argue a broad amount of flexibility in how that's done. I think that in terms of staff that worked on the ordinance, we did always envision the UFC kind of playing a role in developing that policy and just kind of the manner in which those fees can be used. So Perrin, to answer your question, I guess really directly, is we don't have a preconceived plan of how that should occur. And I think this is a great opportunity for this commission to play a big role in that moving forward.
I will chime in a little bit that Chris and internal staff have met once on discussing how this might look moving forward. Haven't really come to any conclusions. Mm-hmm. But there are specific legalities tied around it, like it has to go for trees and tree maintenance and public trees. I think I'm not sure if it's all public or if there can be. I'm not sure about that, but that's why we have Eric around. But there are some specifics as to how it can be spent, and it does have to be spent within the resource district. Mm-hmm. That it came from. So.
Yeah. When we were working on it, the idea was, of course, that it had to be spent for trees or land or space for planting trees in that district. And I think the understanding was that the UFC would play a role in developing the priorities for either through a matrix or through, hands-on selection of places. I think matrix would be the place to start, or some kind of selection criteria for sure.
Yeah. Sharon, did you still have something?
No, Ben and Nancy summarized the whole thing. We discussed it through the whole development process, and what everybody has said has been true. We knew it was going to come back to the UFC with the details that were required, and then we had the legalities attached to it, which just never got formulated.
Okay, good. Patrick?
Yes, I think that the fee in lieu funds can also be go toward funding programs. I think the only restriction for the funds is that it cannot be used for ongoing operational costs.
Cool. Well, that is an idea. That gives us some options. Mark?
Yeah, I had some notes from the, just brief notes from the internal staff meeting when we talked about this, and we were talking about being able to pay for planting and maintaining of public trees. You know, it's not necessarily all dedicated toward putting new ones in, but also taking care of the ones that we've got. We also discussed the possibility of using funds toward making more enhanced tree pits or tree planting sites, since those cost a lot of money to make. And so that is an option where this revenue stream, you know, wasn't previously there. Give us the ability to make nicer tree pits.
Cool. Okay. That's good. Perrin?
So this is happening. We're talking about this in tandem with the development of the open space amendment, which also includes a fee in lieu provision. We've been leaning and favoring in that discussion. I know at least the enviros in that discussion have been leaning towards the acquisition of open space for the benefit of the public. That would be, the open space fee in lieu funds would be used to acquire things like parks, city parks, including little pocket parks downtown to create little patches of greenery here and there in the sea of development. Also things like significant watershed protection areas, you know, where you have a forested patch that's going to hold the hillside up and keep the stream clean, that kind of thing. So we could think about this in that context as sort of in tandem with the open space fee in lieu. If the open space fee in lieu were to go to public space acquisition, and the fee in lieu from the tree protection ordinance could go to, adding more tree canopy to Asheville, I think that's, those two concepts can work really nicely in tandem, including, that money could be spent in public parks to add more trees and that sort of thing. It sounds like Vidilla's chiming in with a detail about the, wait, I have to find the chat, about the money needing to be used within the area of the site. I'm not sure that's true, actually. I know a lot of, and I don't think that we've settled on that. I think what we've discussed geographically speaking in terms of limitation is similar to what we're talking about today, which is, well, you need to spend that money locally, like within the district that the funds were generated from. So I'm not sure I agree with Vidilla's statement there. In any case, I just want to encourage, okay, so legal has clarified a point. Well, that'll be an interesting discussion to talk to legal about that. In any case, if the idea that fee in lieu in open space could only be spent on site when the whole purpose of open space fee in lieu is to wasn't provided to mitigate the lack of open space makes no sense at all. So, again, I completely disagree with Vidilla, and we'll have to hash that out later with the legal department, I suppose. So yeah, you need to be able to spend that money offsite so that open space can be provided with those funds. So back to my point, we could look at these in tandem and use the fee in lieu from the tree canopy protection amendment to provide trees. It sounds like there's an issue with them being used for maintenance, though, from what Patrick was saying, that there's a restriction on operational funds, and that might include maintenance. I think I'd be interested in hearing Patrick's opinion about that. But anyway, there's a concept for you. You buy the land with the open space fee in lieu, and then you forest the land with the tree protection fee in lieu.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to jump in real quick. Oh, sorry, Steve.
There are several important points that were raised there. One is the use of fees for maintenance, which I don't think is a good idea. And the other is we need to work these things in tandem. I think Perrin's making a very good point. The city needs a way to create suitable open space and green space and canopy. So we need that kind of thinking so that these things are working together. That's my main point anyway. And I think we were approved through legal for use of the fee in lieu funds in our case for the district area, not on site.
Exactly. It has to be broader, just you wouldn't have anywhere to go with it. One place to look is Charlotte has a two-prong approach to their fee in lieu. They have the tree planting and programs, and they have a whole section set up for land acquisition as part of their fee in lieu. So I definitely think that land acquisition is something we should consider. If it's possible. It can be hard to acquire land within the district where those funds come from at times. It really depends on what's available. You have to pay market price and things like that. So, but it's definitely an option we need to look at, especially if there is going to be a fee in lieu with open space and how to coordinate that, which makes this whole discussion of how do we make these decisions even slightly more layered if there's going to be this other piece that we're working hopefully in tandem with as well. Looked like Patrick had the next hand up.
So just to offer clarification to Perrin, these funds could, for example, be used to help pay for an urban forest master plan because it's a one-shot deal, but it couldn't be used for helping to fund an urban forester position because that is ongoing. So that's the difference.
And maintenance would fit that description as well. Maintenance.
Well, I think maintenance needs to be looked at, whether we're talking about, specialized treatments for disease and pests that might be outside of the typical program, something like that, versus the kind of maintenance that's already being done through public works, right? So we're not going to pay for what's supposed to already be covered, does that make sense? But if it's something additional that would benefit the city, then that possibly could be included as an option. But I think that's the first thing. Obviously, what we're looking at here is we need to know what are all the options, every option that this can go for, then how do you decide which of those options you're going for? So I think that's obviously the first step. Any other discussion? It sounds to me like we need to have these detailed conversations with the city and with the legal team, obviously, and making sure that we have all of those pieces before we can then decide what will those priorities be. Thoughts? So I am totally ready to jump in on this one. And if anyone else wants to join me, I don't mind being a working group of one, and I'll bring it back to y'all. But if somebody's interested, we can start that conversation with the city.
I'll work with you on that, Amy.
Right on. All right. Thanks, Perrin.
I'll be happy to contribute too.
Thanks, Steve. Ed, did you have something?
No, I'm good. I was wondering if it's something the policy working group should take on, but it seems like you're starting a separate group, and that's fine.
I'm open to it. I mean, if you guys want to, if that makes more sense to keep it, I don't know how much else, you guys have a lot.
Well, the reason I raised that as a possibility is because it's the policy working group that worked really closely with development services in crafting the canopy amendment to start with. So, I don't know if we need more to chew on, but just for the sake of continuity, it would make sense to do it that way.
That's true.
Sure. That's fine. So policy working group, is everybody good with that?
I'm okay with that. I think, yeah.
Steve, Sharon, and
yeah.
Who else was on that?
Patrick.
And Patrick. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm, I have quite a lot to do, so if it's all right with the well, no, never mind. Forget it.
Thank you.
If it gets to be too much, then we'll hand it off and make it separate. If we need to just call it a separate working group so we can switch up some help, then that's totally fine. But if you guys want to start with it, and then we can see where it goes. Is that all right? Good.
Yeah, I guess that's a good start. And Ben, if we can get some clarity, Ben and Nancy, some clarity on exactly what we legally can do with the money or not, I think that would give us a good start. I think our focus should primarily be on enhancing the canopy, use it for canopy enhancements one way or another. But if we had some good clarity on what we can do with the money from a legal perspective, that would be very useful.
Yeah, we can do that, Ed. I think that's a great point. So maybe, and I'll still say, in terms of how the city can spend money, because there's always lots of legal constraints, I do think it's a pretty. We have some broad ability to use these funds in a positive way. I'm really excited about this, actually. And maybe what we can do is, if we can get an initial meeting scheduled of that policy working group, I'll try to get Eric Edgerton to come in and maybe spend some time with us and just kind of set some parameters on how we can use those fees, and then we can kind of go from there. So if you'll keep me in the loop, I'll get Eric in that first meeting or two, and we'll figure that out.
That sounds great.
Okay.
And so, not to be duplicative, is that a word? Perrin, maybe somebody from the open space group should also join that conversation to, for their enlightenment with respect to that fee in lieu. So I really do think that there should be some coordination and overlap with at least a philosophical overlap.
Definitely. Please feel free to pull me in on meetings where that's being discussed.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
It's a good idea. And unless, would having us all there be a quorum issue? Anyway, anytime there's a meeting, yeah, we still have the limit. Anyway, let me know. I'm happy to be there if I can. Sharon, you got a hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say that Vidilla's got the fee in lieu from legal, his information now that we could wade through and then see exactly how much we're stuck within those parameters, if that makes sense.
So maybe look at that first before we have a meeting with Ben and others.
Yes, okay. I agree, especially if we want to coordinate the two together. Yep. Because open space has entirely different criteria and how their fee in lieu is operable than we do so far.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be good. Have as much information as you can get before your meeting so you can ask questions and whatnot. So good. All right. And Perrin, I just want to make sure it's okay with you and Steve to hand that over to the policy working group for now, and we'll all come back together as it develops. Okay.
That's what I wanted in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. All right. Well, under the tree canopy preservation ordinance, the other piece was to continue our discussion on adding heritage tree language and protections to that ordinance. I don't think there's anything this very minute to change about what we're doing here as the UFC, but there has been discussion outside of this group in our in the tree protection task force and other community members, bringing up the idea of, is there any possible way to go beyond just the tree canopy preservation ordinance in preserving heritage trees? Meaning, it's a broad definition, but particularly, large or historic or, otherwise notable trees in the community. And so I just wanted to throw this open for discussion. Is this something that as a group we would like to take on separately from just under the tree canopy preservation ordinance? So we know we want to try to integrate it there where we can provide differential penalties and or compensation for removing or preserving those heritage trees. And that we've already talked about and have a pathway to add that in. But aside from that, is there anything else we want to do as a group in terms of heritage trees? There are potentially other options, for getting more of those preserved within the city, but we do end up on potentially shaky ground because we're already doing this as much as possible for public trees. That pretty much just leaves private trees and or development sites. But I just want to throw it out there for discussion because this is something that our community members have brought to our attention as a priority. So go ahead, Sharon.
I always envisioned this in 719-1. And I don't know whether that's what you said or you were saying to do it in an entirely different category than put it under an existing ordinance that we have, kind of like what Wilmington has done, where it's separate, where you just fill out an application and then it goes to their urban forester who, and I do know from our talks with Eric Edgerton in the past about this, the process that he envisioned that it went through council, that we do it every 6 months with a whole list of trees and then have a removal policy, kind of like what they do in historic areas. You can remove a tree, but you've got to have a darn good reason. You've got to have a plan, and it goes before a board kind of situation before you get rid of it. So I'm thinking of all these different ways that different people do it. But I was listening to you and saying, is everything open, or did you guys talk about having it in a particular format?
Currently, it's all open. This is out there. So what the community members are pushing for is obviously very broad and large scale, full protection, all large trees, all historic trees. If you're going to cut it, possibly a permit, possibly a fee, so that's, would be sort of the maximum. But as far as this group, the discussion is it something we want to pursue, and in what ways? Currently, there is nothing on or off the table that's specific, other than trying to get it into the preservation ordinance that we've already discussed. So go ahead, Patrick.
Yes, in our agenda meeting, particularly for this discussion, I had requested and hoped that Eric Edgerton could join us. I assume he's got a scheduling conflict or is in court, but it would be good to, I think, hear from him, because I believe that was on his recommendation, why the initial reference and protection for heritage trees was taken out of the draft tree canopy preservation ordinance. And I don't know if Ben has insight on that, but during our discussions, I think after that, I do believe that Eric indicated that this would be something that we could amend into 719 after the 12 or 18 month sort of study period that Development Services requested before making any amendments. So I don't know if Ben has any more information on that. But I do know that what the community wants, and it's sort of symbolized by a draft resolution that was written and presented to the Tree Protection Task Force, and I think also was requested to have a discussion within the Urban Forestry Commission. And that resolution called for protecting heritage trees, whatever that category will end up including, in all both public and private properties. And of course, there is a legal issue as to how far we can legislate on private properties that are not subject to development. So yeah, we do need to have a pretty robust discussion on not only where we go with this in terms of the 719, but also the legal extent to which we can offer coverage for heritage trees. So Ben, do you?
Couldn't find my mute button for a second. No, or Patrick, thank you. I don't want to speak for Eric, so we probably do need to talk to him. I don't have a lot to add. Patrick, I think your recollection of the process and where we left it with the city's legal department is absolutely correct. So maybe we'll hear some discussion from some of the members, and Patrick, I'll try to add anything that I think we don't cover after that. Thank you.
So Ed, I see your hand up. This actually reminds me that, we talked to the city about having this year or so to look over the new ordinance and see how things are rolling out. But, we should probably almost start scheduling some meetings to bring those groups to the table, probably through the policy working group, to start having those discussions of how is it going? That data should start to be rolling in, especially as we get toward the fall. So anyway, just a note to push that down and maybe start scheduling those. But go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that giving trees special protected status is not without precedent. There are communities that do that. Even on single family homes or properties, there's at least a permitting requirement for trees that would meet that heritage status. And there's some communities that would deny permits if the trees weren't presenting risk. So I'm not quite as clear as the status in North Carolina, but I could throw Atlanta out for an example. There's just absolutely no way the city of Atlanta would permit the removal of a heritage tree unless it was presenting a risk. There's some other communities in Georgia that I've worked with that require permitting, but then allow the removal of heritage trees. The permitting process is just an opportunity to educate the homeowner. Sometimes their fear of the trees are misadvised by tree cutting companies, for example. It does allow an educational opportunity where, you might be able to talk a homeowner out of removing a tree, showing them the value rather than, whatever reason it is that they do want to remove it. So there's a lot of pressure from the community to address this issue. And I think we really should continue this discussion.
Did I miss another hand up? Patrick, did you have something else?
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay. Anyone else? I don't know if this very minute this is something we need obviously to decide on, but I agree with Ed. It's something we need to discuss further. Are we going to try to at least keep this on the table? Maybe see if we can't put together some sort of framework, look through existing North Carolina legislation, see what might be possible. And so not to put more on policy working group, but just something to kind of have on there, just at least in the background for now. We have a lot of priorities in this group, but something that we can't, revisit and see what kind of information we can pull together. So any other thoughts on heritage trees for now? Go ahead, Perrin.
Just to raise the 1984 statute that applies to Raleigh and Asheville and empowers us to make special laws protecting our tree canopy here in Asheville specifically. So obviously that will be useful in pondering this.
That's right. Thank you. Good reminder. Maybe we lead the way on this one. That would be awesome. But all right. Anything else? All right. Then moving on for the working group updates that we have right now. So the open space working group, we had a little bit from you, but where are we at with that one?
So Patrick attended the last meeting. I was at a hearing in Greensboro during the last meeting, so I couldn't attend, but generally speaking, and I'll turn this over to Patrick in a minute to give the fine level details of what happened at the last meeting, but It seems as though we're getting to a point where we're starting to whittle down to the last list of sticking points, which has been complicated by new ideas being introduced at this late stage, controversial new ideas being introduced into the process at the late stage that seem to have very little chance of producing agreement by the group. So we're kind of moving in two directions at once. We've whittled down a lot of the final sticking points that the group has. And so that list has gotten smaller and smaller. And we gotten to the point where Vidil has been able to produce a list of, here are the issues that we have remaining that we need to resolve before we'll be done. So that's a sign of progress that we've gotten that far, that there's just a handful of issues. Adding new ideas into the mix doesn't help a whole lot at this stage, but we have been dealing with that. And so yes, we are getting close. I think it seems like a lot of the worst ideas have been raised at the end, strangely enough, so that the process has been difficult to follow and not very easy to understand where we're at in the process. But Vidil has given us some more details lately, and it's helped to kind of clarify things. So I think we're honing in. And Patrick, I'll let you characterize sort of what your prediction is about exactly how far we are in the process, since you were at the last meeting and I wasn't.
Well, as Perrin said, we're rapidly whittling outstanding issues down. I think at the last meeting, I'll touch on one particular area because it was part of our initial opposition to the open space ordinance. And that is, we had one of our points in opposition was that there would be no open space required for the CBD and for the River Arts District. And of course, we resolved the CBD issue in that the Urban Forestry Commission said that it would drop its opposition to not having open space in the CBD contingent upon making significant changes in the UDO and the standard and specifications manual around street trees in the CBD. And I believe that Ed will be reporting on that more in detail with the policy working group update. But we have made significant progress in that area. As far as the River Arts District is concerned, at the last meeting, it was made clear that both the Riverfront Redevelopment Commission and the group representing business owners in the RAD are opposed to putting open space requirements in the River Arts District. Part of their rationale is that when they came up with the River Arts District Form Code, they included greenways and even the French Broad River as sort of substitutes for open space. I think there was a concept called view-throughs, and that is the views between buildings and pedestrian traffic between buildings also would be viewed as open space. And they were just reticent about changing the form code in the River Arts District to require open space. So I think the consensus was at the meeting that we would not require open space in the River Arts District because there was just a lot of opposition to that. So I think the other area of maybe concern for the Urban Forestry Commission had to do with protected ecological areas, for example, aquatic buffers, steep slopes, riparian areas, and whether or not that would be required, whether or not that would be applicable to open space or be exempted from the open space requirements. It's hard to tell whether we reach consensus on that subject. We had considerable discussion about if you had an aquatic buffer, for example, and that was to be counted toward open space, how would that work in terms of utilization? In other words, if people could just, trample through that aquatic buffer, does that meet the criteria for open space? Or whether there would need to be paths, benches, things like that in the aquatic buffer to meet the definition of open space. And we went back and forth on that, and I'm not sure that we reached a final conclusion, although Videla could correct me if he wishes. But I think the staff position is that a percentage of protected areas could be counted toward open space. I believe that percent was 50%. And so I'm not sure whether that's going to be on the up at the next meeting for further discussion and final consensus on or not. But so those would be the two main areas that we discussed at the last meeting that would be of interest to the Urban Forestry Commission. I do think, and I did recommend to Perrin that before the next meeting that the Urban Forestry Commission working group on open space, as well as the representatives from SACE and NAC meet so that we can go over everything to date, things that have been agreed to by the task force, and anything that is still outstanding, so that if meeting number 10, which will be held on July 14th, is the last meeting, that we're prepared to for that meeting in terms of bringing everything to a conclusion. Or if there's something that is really important to our initial opposition to the initial open space ordinance, whether or not we continue with that opposition.
Thanks, Patrick. And just to add to that, I think there's a couple of things it's worth taking the temperature of the bigger group here while we have everybody on the Urban Forestry Commission. So two things. One, when you describe the River Arts District, whether or not there would be open space required in the River Arts District, it's worth noting that there is a I don't have the vocabulary. There's a section of the River Arts District which currently does have open space required in it. Or if that's not correct, then it's that it's currently proposed to have a certain amount of open space required in it under the current open space amendment. So it's important to note that is the status quo, and that, the business folks coming in from the River Arts District and saying, we just want no open space whatsoever, is actually a retreat from the existing protections that are there. So I think we should consider that. And I'd be interested to hear people's opinions about whether or not removing protections in the status quo is acceptable to the group. The second, I think, big ticket item that I'd like to solicit feedback on is this idea of double counting areas that are already required to be protected, such as aquatic buffers, and allowing those which have to be protected regardless to be counted, double counted as open space as well, whether that's 50% or 100%. The principle of the matter seems extremely important. So I'd like to get the group's feedback for the commissioners who are here today on what your opinions are on those two topics.
Yeah, go ahead, Sharon.
So I'm on the open space via NAC, but I'm not in agreement with the double dipping. I was in agreement for offering buffers if they kept buffers as a B and not reduced it to 30 feet, and instead, because a lot of buffers get reduced with fences. So I suggested a while ago that let's give buffers open space credit so they don't reduce them if they don't reduce it. But that has turned around and kind of backfired on the fact that we have riparian areas, and I don't think we should offer that on any type of open space credit whatsoever because it's protected. And then that removes any additional open space that's would be available on the development. So I am in complete agreement with you, Perrin. Protected areas are protected and should not be given credit for any percentage as open space. And then also, I made a note in comments, is view corridors is what Patrick was referring to. I had one of the other architects send me code information that there is view corridors required in the RAD, meaning that my fear for the RAD is that it's building on top of building on top of building, even though they say there's open space now. We've got the river on one side and the green space on the other. It very well easily could be built out. So what we did is we divided up two sections that are much more dense and saying, okay, these two overlays cannot be have open space because they're a lot denser, but then this whole larger area, we should offer and have open space in these areas to protect for the future. So what I have not done is I have not read to see if we really do have view like other cities do, a city I came from because of the Pacific Ocean, that we do have actual protection of view corridors. So that's the reading that I need to do to find out, are there protections for view corridors? And if they're not, then my concern is the fact that in the future, we could build one building after another without any open space in between them, if that makes any sense.
It does. Thanks, Sharon. Go ahead, Patrick.
So during the open space meeting, I tried to make the point that if there were no open space at all, wasn't even in the ordinance, then developers would still have to protect aquatic buffers and other riparian areas. So does it make sense then to, if they already have to preserve those areas, does it make sense that they then can count that toward open space? And of course, the response from the development community is that, well, if we have to preserve those areas, in addition to providing open space, that's not, when those preserved areas are not counted toward, then that reduces the area that we have left to development. And, I tried to make my argument, but I was corrected that open space is not about development. So, and then Sharon Sumrall, of course, who's knowledge about everything, said that actually the protected areas like aquatic buffers and steep slope, I forget which one is the steepest, A or B, can still be disturbed. They can still be graded, but there are requirements that if developers do grade protected areas, there's requirements of what they have to put back in after the grading. So, it ended up being a very complicated discussion within the task force.
But the statement, which is the first paragraph of the open space amendment, states that the purpose of open space, in part, is stormwater control, which is directly tied to the percentage of pervious surfaces on site, which is completely dictated by how much development happens on location, which can be buffered and protected and mitigated by how much open space is required, how much undeveloped space on site is required. And that's one of the functions of open space, is to help us with stormwater control. So yeah, I mean, it's right there in the first paragraph of the amendment. I think there's really no question that open space is for limiting how much of the site is developed so that we can not flood the neighbors as much as we can manage. So yeah, I think open space has to be additive to be useful. And so, yeah, I'm against the double dipping, but interested in hearing others' thoughts.
I appreciate all the work you guys have done and all this discussion. And I do think you're, from what I can tell, representing the interests of the Urban Forestry Commission, because additional open space does improve, even if not specifically canopy, the rest of the goals that we have here. I would personally agree that I don't think you should double dip on preserved areas. And so push that through as you can, would be where I would sit on that. So go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I have a little difficulty. I'm visually oriented person, so I kind of have to see things on a map or a mapping to get a really clear picture. But I picked up on most of this, and I know it's a complicated but very worthwhile discussion here. I tend to agree with the idea of not double dipping. In most cases, some sites might be quite, consumed by riparian area, perhaps. I'm not sure. I'd have to see that on a mapping system. But yeah, not double dipping, I think, is generally the way what I would think we would want to propose, because we do want to get stormwater situation in natural, with a natural mitigation to it as much as possible.
Thanks, Steve. I saw Vidila had a hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify what the current regulations state regarding open space and the use of some protected land. For example, wetlands and stream buffers, 50% of that is currently allowed to be counted as open space. And the idea is that open space, part of the purpose of open space is providing a location that is protected and useful, so that, in some cases it may not be protected at all, maybe an urban hardscape that is mostly pavement. In other cases, I'm just explaining what has been the rule so far. It's been interpreted that some of your stream buffer, it makes sense to allow that to count as open space, because in reality, people use it and value it for that. And we, as much as we want to think about regulations for protection, we need to try to balance our multiple goals, city goals, because we know we're in, certain housing crisis, and so we can choose to exclude the double dipping, which would be a change in policy, but what that would mean is more downward pressure on development going in this direction. But that's definitely something you can do. Thank you.
Thanks, Vidal. And that is good to know that currently a certain percentage is allowed. Perhaps changing that number, maybe instead of 50%, we could advocate for something like 30%, as a compromise. Just an idea. But any other comments on this? Again, I think you all are doing an excellent job in representing us as the UFC. So I have no problem with proceeding on that. So go ahead, Perrin.
Yeah, just in response to your comment, Amy, the trick with the math, if you're reducing the amount of double dipping that can occur, is that the whole thrust of the open space amendment is to slash dramatically the amount of open space that's required on site in most developments. And so it's, if you're trying to make the math work out, it gets tricky because it's moving directions at the same time. So it's more than meets the eye.
Absolutely. Like I said, I know that you guys are, this deep in it. So I totally trust the expertise that you're putting into it. So, any other input from our group for them? Thank you. We look forward to the next update. All right. Next is the policy working group. An update. I know there was some work on Chapter 20.
Yeah, over the course of the last month, Patrick worked his way through Chapter 20, and so he and I have both sort of worked our way through it and flagged issues that we want to discuss and perhaps make changes to. I think the next step to that is that the group has a meeting, and I don't know if you all want to meet face-to-face or just try to do an online meeting. But we should schedule something within the next couple of weeks to really sit down and start making some substantive changes to Chapter 20. Sharon and Patrick, Steve, are you open to a face-to-face meeting?
Yeah, I agree. That would be good.
I am.
As I am, yes.
Okay, great. That sounds good. I'll get with all of you offline and we'll schedule a time when we can do that. Haley was kind enough to open us a file for our draft work, the draft work of the policy working group on the Google Cloud Drive with the city. So we have a place to keep our stuff and to work off single documents instead of having different iterations floating around. So, so hopefully we'll have more to report next time we meet. Patrick mentioned the spin-off working group or the spin-off group from the Open Space Task Force that's looking at downtown tree enhancements or canopy enhancements. And I think that's one of the good things that came out of this open space discussion. It's a good group of people, and we're having some good discussion led by Vidila on ways to make trees grow and survive better downtown. Things related to soil volume and exposure and orientation and sidewalk widths and other creative ways to do a better job of what we're doing. And I've asked Vidila to join us next month, if it's okay with you, Amy, to give us a presentation on the work that group is doing. I think it's going to make some really positive changes to the standards and spec manual. And
that was my next question is, what's the goal of the group? How are you going to solidify that work? So that's great.
Right. And Vidila just sent a text saying, and possibly expanding those changes to citywide regulations, not to just downtown. So I think possibly we should definitely do that. So it's a good spinoff. So if that's good with you, Amy, Vidila said he could be available, and I would like him to brief the group on the work that we've been doing.
Yeah, that'd be great. Vidila, we'll put you on the agenda for, I believe it's August the 3rd.
I believe that's correct, yeah. Yep. And then one last thing in the text in the message box, I put a link to an NC State publication on protecting and retaining trees for municipalities and counties in North Carolina. So it's a pretty useful publication that begins to answer some of the questions we have about heritage trees. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you. And so I'll be adding a line item for you all to update us ongoing for the fee in lieu decision process as well. So just a heads up.
Okay.
That'll be on starting next month. All right. The next working group is the mission statement working group. And in the packet for this month, we have our updated draft. We're calling this version 2. There's been iterations, but I don't know if everybody had a chance to look at that. Would it be possible to bring it up on the screen in here? If we can pull it up, then I'll have to just read it without anybody seeing it. But we're basically ready as far as the working group is concerned to discuss and possibly vote on this. And then if we're in agreement on the wording of this mission statement, then we can proceed through the working group to talk with city about exactly how we implement that, because that'll be the next step is, currently in, I believe it's chapter 2, where it talks about the creation of the Urban Forestry Commission. There's some kind of similar wording in there, but we're not exactly sure if our best bet is to try to update the UDO or to have this exist in some other way. But our first step is to look at this, decide if we want to vote on, making this our official mission statement. So I'll go ahead and take a moment to read it. I don't think I need to read it out loud for everybody, but. For anyone just listening in, I will go ahead and just read the last part. The beginning is, discussing why urban forests are important. But our mission is then to protect and enhance the urban forest of the city of Asheville through education, collaboration, and policy initiatives that align with the city's Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan and provide for environmental equity and climate resilience. We did choose to leave the specific reference to the comprehensive plan in there with the idea that if that plan were to change, it's an easy one item to fix, whatever they call the new comp plan. So, any discussion, questions? Go ahead, Perrin.
Amy, I'm so sorry to do this to you. I know this is totally my fault because I have not been available for the last couple of weeks or so. So I know you've been trying to get my feedback recently, and there's just one change that I see that was made from the previous iteration, and I'm just not sure why it was made, and so I just want to bring this up. The final sentence of the first paragraph was taken out. So that was the piece that sort of connected the benefits of the urban forest to the work of the Urban Forest Commission. And so, yeah, please.
Yeah, I'll just say, so that was actually a suggestion from Dawn. And after Dawn added the piece about recognizing marginalized communities and those most affected by lack of tree canopy, it became redundant because that was basically a bit of that last sentence. But the point here is if we're not ready to vote on this, we can take it back through the working group and keep going with it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any need to have another month of work on the mission statement. What I'm seeing is that without that sentence, I'm wondering if we should just put the sentence back in, even if it is slightly redundant, just because without it, it doesn't say what we're going to, it doesn't say that we're going to work for these benefits, to promote these benefits. So, I'll
go ahead and read what that was so that everybody has it. So the last sentence of the first paragraph previously said, the Urban Forestry Commission will work to protect Asheville's urban forest and green infrastructure to preserve these benefits for the city of Asheville. And so I see what you're saying, Perrin, that is a bit of the directive that then ties into the actual mission. So we can discuss that. Again, I agree, is redundancy okay in this sort of thing? Probably. I mean, it's not a grammatical test. So we're just trying to get very specific and yet broad wording into something like this.
Yeah.
I'm another.
Go ahead.
As another member of this working group, I don't see a problem with adding that back in, even if it is slightly redundant. I mean, it reiterates a point, an important point. So that's my take on it.
All right. Well, then what we can do if, obviously we can keep this discussion going, but if we were to agree on that, somebody could put forth a motion that we would approve it as written with the inclusion of the last sentence that previously read, the Urban Forestry Commission will work to protect.
So moved.
Second.
All right, let's go ahead and vote. Let me come back on the screen. All right. So let's start with Patrick.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Perrin.
With apologies, aye.
And I vote aye with the amended wording. I will get the final draft with the amended wording to the city as adopted. And then policy, or the mission statement working group, will get together with Nancy on what our next steps are and what the options are. So we'll bring it back to this group once we have those options on how we implement the mission statement. But now we have an official mission statement. So thank you, everybody, for your work on that. All right. Next is TRC working group, which is me and Sharon. So I've actually finally been invited to a TRC meeting. So the next step there is just for me to attend, get to know the process, and then we'll be putting together some procedures on TRC. But that's where we're at right now. So I'll see you at the next meeting, Sharon. I won't be saying anything. I'll probably get with you after to debrief. So, all right. Is there an update on 424 Sunset?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I finally got to the report and submitted it to Ricky Hurley. Part of delivering that had Ed review our notes that we took and Ed's pictures. And part of the discussion with Ricky is that the Grove Park Sunset Mountain Neighborhood Association would get a copy of this report because they're the ones that initiated the complaint. And they've been following our processes in this. So they did get a comment. They did get our recommendations, and they are going to also have a comment to Ricky regarding this, but they're in agreement with what we said, and we're just waiting for Ricky, and then Ricky will take it as zoning enforcement officer on it, and we'll follow through with it. And I'm sure he'll let me know what's going on with it. So.
All right. Do you want to stay then on the agenda? Keep me updated for next month if there's something new to talk about. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then a legislation update. Patrick, anything new on the North Carolina state bills?
No, nothing new. Both 496 and 349 are still in their respective committees. And as far as I know, there's been no movement to date.
All right, thank you. As a reminder, we're just keeping an eye on those. If anything were to happen, then we'd put forth a recommendation to council. And then lastly, a discussion on lastly for new business, or old business, pardon me, the Urban Place UDO amendment. We brought this up previously. This is the a few spots around the city where a specific overlay would take place, allowing for specialized urban development. And Patrick had an update for us on one issue that's come up out of those meetings between CAN and the city on the Urban Place UDO.
Yeah, so the government relations subcommittee on Urban Place had a series of meetings with the planning and urban design staff on changes to the Urban Place District Form Code language that would help mitigate the impact of these mixed-use, high-density projects on surrounding neighborhoods. And I will give the planning staff their due. Together, the two groups made some significant changes in the language that would help mitigate the disparity between, these taller buildings and nearby residential homes. And I give planning and urban design credit for that. The one thing that we did not reach agreement on was the exemption proposed in the code for building impact trees. And we presented our argument and along the lines of what the Urban Forestry Commission, I'm sure, would argue that these high-density projects, there's a lot of buildings, a lot of impervious surfaces, and while there are the other elements of 711.3 applies to these projects, for example, residential buffers that would allow 6 trees. There is the tree canopy preservation ordinance would apply to these projects. And street trees would apply to the project, although it's not clear because there's no designs that have been implemented whether there will be interior streets within these projects. So our concern was that, and given the, even though the tree canopy preservation ordinance would apply to these projects, of course, developers would have the option of paying fee in lieu, which is most likely what they will do with these projects. And finally, with the 4 project areas that have been slated for phase 1 of Urban Place overlay districts, there are a few existing trees on those projects. So our concern was that we wanted to maximize the number of trees that would be in these urban high density areas. And we felt that exempting the building impact trees would run counter to that. The planning staff did give it serious consideration, but in the end came back and said that the exemption to building impact trees for the Urban Place District Form Code was in line with other urban form codes, for example, the CBD and others, and that the real emphasis on these projects was not so much in buildings, but in providing high density residential units for people. So we ended up agreeing to disagree on that, and I informed the planning staff that I would be bringing this issue before the Urban Forestry Commission. And I have written a draft letter to the Planning and Zoning Commission, which will be taking this up, I believe, tomorrow. And in the draft letter, I say that the Urban Forestry Commission is not taken a position on the proposed urban place form district code before the Planning and Zoning Commission, with the exception of the exemption on building impact trees. I'll just quote that specifically in section 711.3, subsection D, subsection 5, states that building impact landscaping, which includes trees and shrubs, quote, shall be required for new and existing buildings in order to soften the view from roads and adjacent properties, provide shade to reduce the heat generated by impervious surfaces, reduce glare, and in italics for emphasis, to help enhance the urban landscape. So, we all know that the NASA developed study, which pinpointed areas that had the highest surface temperatures because of the lack of adequate tree canopy coverage, that high density areas registered high on the scale of urban of the heat island index. So it just seemed incongruous to us that the one size fits all approach to urban design denies residents of urban style living the health and environmental benefits derived from trees that residents in more suburban areas enjoy. So, I'm recommending that we send this letter to the Planning and Zoning Commission, asking them to eliminate the exemption for building impact trees and the urban place district form code.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. Vidila, I don't know if you still had a comment. I saw your hand was up earlier.
I'll just be real brief. I guess one, just to help you all understand how building impact works and just for future projects. So we don't count the first 3,000 square foot of building footprint, but after that, basically for it's one tree per 1,000 square feet, one tree and two shrubs. So if it's a 153,000 square foot building, that's 150 trees. So just kind of an easy way for you all to think about it. But just a couple of things to throw in really quickly, and I'll be presenting this to the Planning and Zoning Commission tomorrow night, so you're all welcome to come and engage in that process if you'd like, or to just submit comments on your own. So these sites that were identified as potential future growth locations for the city in the comp plan are primarily large parking lots. That's the way I like to think about it, that currently don't have trees on them. Part of this form code is trying to get a lot more housing and to have housing happen alongside with commercial development. So because it's a form code, we're trying to be consistent with the other form codes we've established that allow for a higher density of development, to be close, to share walls and things like that, that makes it more difficult to plant the trees that are related to building impact when you have a large project. So just to let you know, these projects will not be devoid of trees. They will still have parking lot landscape, street trees, property line buffers, and then any trees that would be in the open space, which don't require trees, but so they wouldn't be, completely a wasteland of urban, heat island. So just wanted to chime that, put those points in. Thanks again.
Thank you. And I think, many of us are in favor of smart development on former, brown sites and things like that. But I would argue that just because something was not in a previous iteration of the code doesn't mean that should continue. So right now what we have in front of us for further discussion is the letter that Patrick wrote, if we choose as a commission to approve it to be sent to Planning and Zoning. So any other questions or discussion? And this was included in the packet in the link with the documents. Go ahead, Ed. think you're on mute though.
First, I want to tell Patrick how much I appreciate the work he's put into this. I think it's a very well-written letter, and it really it clearly articulates our position. And I'd like to move that we approve this letter and send it on to the Planning Commission.
Second.
Excellent. Any other discussion before we vote? All right, we will vote, starting with Patrick.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Perrin.
Aye.
And I vote aye. So it passes. We'll go ahead and send this on. And I don't know if Haley and Nancy, if you can help us forward that to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you. All right. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just to make clear, Haley or Nancy, are you going to submit it before the 5 o'clock deadline today? Pardon?
Well, I guess we have to. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you. We appreciate it. And Patrick, thank you for your work on that. All right. Lastly, and actually, Nancy, I think this is you. So for new business, some boards and commissions updates.
Yes. So we have, as y'all saw, it came out in an email last week too. There's a new ethics policy that was adopted for the advisory boards and commissions, and that covers y'all because we don't have a separate one outside of the one from the city, or the overarching one of the ethics policy. So it's attached, if y'all read and familiarize yourself with it. Part of this came from the 160D updates, that there was more definition on the conflict of interest as part of it. And then some of the meeting rules and decorum came from having the online meetings. And so just to touch on a few is that, you know, because y'all are generally good with most of them, of like being civil and courteous and respectful and all that. But for virtual meetings, which we're not going to have moving forward, as we know right now, because that was specific. So virtual meetings were specific to the state of emergency currently. So. But to be visible and on camera to the extent possible. But that's generally it. Be respectful. And so to be mindful of social media posts, that they are private, that you're not speaking for the board unless, and that other things like that, that you aren't, where is that one? That generally you're not allowed to act on behalf of the full body of the board or the city of Asheville unless you're authorized to do so. That sort of thing. Advisory to staff, et cetera, the social media things. And then, so the specifics of the conflict of interest that have, I think, changed or been more clarified in 160D is that it specifies that includes substantial financial interest and close familial. And so 160D defines that close familial relationship. So that's helpful for us. And the one thing that is also to note, just for actions, that if someone does need to be recused, that is done through a vote by the remaining boards of the commission, by the remainder of the commission. That's it. That's about it. And that's just, you know, a heads up that this changed. And yes, Karen.
So just about the conflicts of interest, I just want to highlight what you're saying so everybody's following that if we identify that we have a familial or economic interest in a question that comes before the commission, we need to identify that to one another and sort of volunteer and say, oh, that's my brother, or whatever. And then you're saying that the rest of the commission members would vote on whether or not you need to abstain from voting on that issue and recuse yourself and abstain from voting.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, they do say that it can be done like that, identifying that conflict of interest can be done at the meeting or even prior to with the staff liaison, or if y'all have questions, like that the city attorney's office is always, available to help make those determinations too. If there's any questions about that. So.
Thanks, Nancy.
Sure.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, Nancy, since you brought it up, if this is as we know it now, our last scheduled virtual meeting, and the August meeting would be in person, do we have a meeting place in mind, or do we have a meeting place in mind?
Yes. So we will be back in A109. So back in our old, large, echoing conference room.
The one where the TRC used to meet.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
That one is awfully echoey. Are there any other? There's no other places. That one can get distracting.
Not big enough to hold all of us.
Yeah, we're on a weird size. Yeah.
And
all right.
But I do know I don't know. I'll ask Chris when what the updates and stuff are, but they're looking at updating some of the rooms for technology and stuff. So I don't know.
All right. Thanks. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah. Has there been a decision made whether the alternative compliance participants will join an in-person meeting virtually, or would they be required to attend in person?
I haven't checked on that specifically, but I believe that everybody's required to come in person for now. That's where we are now. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Nancy about the ethics policy or return to in-person meetings? So that will start next month. August 3rd, our next meeting will be in person.
It will. One thing to remind y'all is do park in the visitor parking. And if there is no visitor parking available, come in and make sure to ask us for a parking pass that you can run out and put in your car. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or points for today? We had a really great discussion. Sorry, we went just a little over 3 p.m. The rest of the agenda is the updates from the Tree Protection Task Force. And then we just need to vote to adjourn if there's nothing else. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, just in addition to the letter that will be submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission later today, I also believe that Sharon will be attending the Planning and Zoning Commission and will give her, as a member of the Urban Forestry Commission, give her 3-minute speech on the building impact tree exemption, sort of following the lines of the letter.
Great, thanks, Sharon. And as I think it was Vidila pointed out, we are all welcome as members of the community to be a part of that as well and submit comment. But thanks, Sharon, that's great. All right, then I just need to move to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, so voting, Patrick.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Perrin.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you all so much. We'll see you in person next month.